Hello, everyone, and welcome to Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast in all of the internet. My name is Matthew Stoner.
My name is Patrick Nisley.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, we got a very special guest for you on this evening. We are joined by the one and only Cina Saffary, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming on the show, Cina.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Thanks for being here, Cina. You are here to talk all about our main topic for today's episode, which is motion controls in video games. We'll talk about the history of motion controls, the pros and cons, and what we think about motion controls throughout all of the video game industry. Also in the news section, we'll talk about the latest Nintendo Direct rumors, and of course, talk about our hot girl video 69, some Sony exclusivity for the new Avengers game coming out, and much, much more. Before we get started, how y'all doing?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Episode 77. That's lucky number sevens.
That's right.
Yeah. Cina, I'm glad you were able to come on the episode because I know you're a huge fan of motion controls.
Yeah, I try to avoid them when I can, actually. But
we'll be getting into some good conversation about it.
I'm doing pretty good. Things are evening out for me. I've been a lot less stressed lately. That's good.
Very good. When this podcast releases, by the way, it will be my birthday, so feel free to send me your Nintendo Gold points or eShop cards whenever you're listening to this. Thank you very much.
Do you also accept a Dreamcast merch?
Yes, I accept Dreamcast merch and Dreamcast gift cards to buy Dreamcast games.
David's Cash App will be put in the show notes.
No, probably not.
Just kidding.
You can subscribe to my OnlyFans if you really want to get me a present.
Well, last week we talked with David Wise about composing video game music, and that was an awesome episode. And in it, we talked about Jammin' Sam Miller, who checked out the episode and gave us a comment on YouTube. So we wanted to shout out Jammin' Sam Miller.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting to listen to David Wise's take on what Jammin' Sam Miller's doing, because he's doing those recreations of the original Donkey Kong Country songs. And hopefully we didn't drag him too hard in that episode. Thanks for commenting, Sam.
I also wanted to quickly shout out a friend of mine, Kyle Jones. Hey, Kyle, thanks for listening. He said that he really likes the episodes where we have industry people on to kind of talk about the nitty gritty. And I do too. Yeah, it's a lot. It's really cool to see different sides of the video game industry like that.
Yeah, we're working on some other folks to come to this podcast in future episodes, so stay tuned.
I'm just a regular guy, so so tough luck this week.
When I was taking a video game writing class in college, I actually commissioned Cina to do a chiptune version of "Happiness Is a Warm Gun" by the Beatles, and that turned out really well. Never finished the game, but
I never finished the chiptune either.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was psyched to listen to last week's episode. It was cool, especially when he talked about like composing for the NES and stuff. I wanted to be like, I was like kind of like geeking out, like you really did it back in the day. I don't know. I just had like so many questions that I wanted to ask him, but I wasn't on the show that week.
We'll have you on the next time we interview him.
Yeah, sweet.
Want to make one more shout out to the Switch Headz community. David asked a question, a challenge question, if you will, where people took screenshots of their most played games from their Switch hardware. Just want to give the results of that. So we have number one being Animal Crossing, of course.
Not surprising.
Followed by Skyrim, Super Mario Maker 2, Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, Smash Ultimate, and Binding of Isaac.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I liked seeing whenever somebody new would post and a new game would pop into the top 15. That was always kind of exciting. Just a way to see kind of what everybody's tastes are as they're playing. So thanks everybody for participating in that.
And if you're out there listening, we'd love to hear from you. You too could be shouted out. We also appreciate it when you share our podcast with a friend or online somewhere. And now we will talk about all the news and rumors going on in the Nintendo and gaming world. So August 6th is the Nintendo quarterly investor meeting. Today is August 4th. And everybody's been saying they surely aren't going to go into that meeting without having made some announcements about future games. Well, it sure looks like they are at this point. But there's a lot of rumors floating around, and I think we should parse through some of that as best we can.
For sure.
There's a lot of Nintendo Direct rumors, and in particular, I've been hearing August 17th, but I could not find the source for that date myself.
Do you think you maybe dreamed that date?
No, I didn't, because there's people talking about it. If I dreamed it, it would be like right now. Surprise Direct. But there's been all these rumors, and like Nate Drake and King Zell, or as he's known now, Tsubasa on Reset Era, have been talking about August being like a stop on the journey. They've been kind of calling it that, like meaning that maybe that this isn't the big one.
Mm-hmm.
Only getting another mini partner Direct in August. And this is another interesting thing. Jeff Grubb, we've talked about this before. He's got this summer game mess list he's been kind of like keeping, where all these events he puts them together, and he's got some inside information. And he moved Wildcard Nintendo to be between August 11th and August 22nd, which kind of lines up with that 17th thing.
I think this one in particular is really fucking funny because like, as soon as he moved this up in his own like personal Google Keep document that he's been keeping, the internet was just like, Nintendo Direct between the 11th and the 22nd confirmed. And it's like, yo, it's just a notes document. Like, there very well could be something between then. And I hope there is. And I would think that there would be, but like, man, it just shows like how much these like insiders on Twitter, like how much power they really have over the conversation. Yeah. It's crazy.
Totally. And then speaking of Twitter, Hot Girl Video 69, like Matt said, has been prolific as ever. She's out there posting all kinds of stuff, talking about things she has allegedly heard, and reposted some 4chan Direct leak that says that's the one. That one says it's going to be on the 17th of August. That's where it comes from.
Okay, right.
I am now looking at this again. And it's a reasonable leak. Like if you read through this, it's like there's no huge out there things on there. Like I could see it being a Nintendo Direct.
Mm-hmm.
We can go through it if y'all want, but
I mean, some of the stuff, there was some stuff that seemed a little odd, but also very Nintendo. Like, for instance, I think she wrote on, the 4chan leaks had that there'd be no new console added to Nintendo Switch Online, but they'd be adding some sort of mission system or whatever for the games that are on there. And it's like, I definitely don't want that to be true. I'd love to see like some N64 games or Game Boy games added. But that does sound like something Nintendo would do, right? The kind of sort of like blissfully ignorant Nintendo way,
Everybody's clamored for achievements on Nintendo system, but if it comes in lieu of something like that, everybody's going to hate it.
Yeah, that's so true.
So it just felt believable somewhat. And then also Tiffany, Hot Girl Video 69, also posted a list of everything that they have allegedly heard from their Nintendo sources, which is less believable. Maybe. I don't know. It's just a lot of stuff.
And these are things that they've heard at some point with no speculation that it'll be in the next Direct or even within the next year's Direct.
Right. Just projects that are being worked on. Like you said, could be years off. So that's a great way to leak something, right?
These are coming from her quote cuck sources, I believe. She is still a sex worker. And I think that's allegedly how she's getting her information.
Right.
I don't know. There were some interesting ones on there, though, for sure. I mean, obviously, the one that everybody's talking about is like some new Mother project or an Earthbound reboot sort of situation. That would obviously be incredible if that's true, but it's so hard to believe stuff like that these days.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Mother and Earthbound, those aren't on NSO, correct?
No.
There's not a single one of those games.
Earthbound came to the Wii U Virtual Console, and it was like a huge deal whenever it came out, and it was actually even priced higher than the other Super Nintendo games because it was kind of like a premium game, I guess. But that's the last time we've seen an official port or anything like that.
They ported Earthbound Zero too, right?
That's correct.
At the same time.
I mean, there was Metroid spin-offs we've been hearing about for sure. I think one of the interesting things that she posted in that list was 2 pieces of hardware, one obvious and one not obvious. And I'd love to just speculate on that for a second. I mean, obviously this is all super, super rumor mill, really coming from one source. But I mean, what do you guys think those could be? Like, she alludes to some of it in there.
Matt thinks the obvious one is the Switch Pro because he wants to talk about that.
Boy, do I ever love talking about the Switch Pro.
Well, we've got reason to talk about it.
Yeah, we've got reason to talk about it this time around.
We're gonna, Matt.
I think the other one might be, because she said basically, I can confirm there's a weird thing about past game systems. I cannot confirm when it's happening, but I've hinted at it quite a bit, and I hope my hints make sense soon. But think about a very easy way Nintendo could rake in tons of money. And to me, that screams like another like classic console or like mini console, right? I don't know if they would do something with the Game Boy with the Analog Pocket coming out. So I mean, maybe N64 Classic or something like that. But you have to think that well is also kind of dried up for Nintendo a little bit.
Yeah, or maybe another tier to the subscription or something.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah, and there's also the interesting thing on there of the non-Breath of the Wild 2 Zelda game on her list of things that, in her words, probably people will be like, oh, duh, when that launches. And I think that's interesting.
I think I know what that is.
What is it?
I think it's Four Swords Adventures, and that would be an NSO game that you could play online. I think
that's a really good guess.
I think I think if that comes out, let me not say whenever that comes out, but if that comes out, it just makes a ton of sense. That's something that people would be like, oh yeah, of course I can play this with my friends online, and it would be like a little free pack-in game like it's been in the past. So
there's more stuff on all these leaks and lists, and we could talk about it for a long time, but we got to talk about that hardware, that Switch Pro, right, Matt?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a must.
I feel like let's talk about it. I don't want poo-poo on it, but let's do it.
Matt is in a Dante-esque hell cycle whenever this happens, but we're happy to put you through it, Matt.
Yeah. I'm happy to be here.
I don't pretend to know why this hints at the Nintendo Switch, and I've listened to like Spawnwave and some other people explain this, but there was a job listing at NVIDIA where they say they're hiring somebody to work on next generation graphics and AI technologies for gaming consoles and yada yada and some other things, and people are like, oh, that probably means the Nintendo Switch successor or a upgrade of some kind. I guess because NVIDIA works with Nintendo and or some of the other technical things.
I think you mean NVIDIA works only for Nintendo and that's it.
Yeah, for like console, for just period.
No, I was joking. NVIDIA does lots of stuff outside of Nintendo.
Okay, yeah. So it's like, that's why but I guess they only do stuff. I don't know. But if people are like, that's what it points to for some reason, I'm not sure.
Specifically, the reason people think that it would be for a Switch successor of some sort is that it's like AI. It like uses AI basically to increase fidelity of resolution and frames per second, right? So it's basically like machine learning added into game presentation or computation, right, of the graphics card. So I think the idea would be, this would be a way for a Switch 2 to have increased visuals, increased frame rates, increased resolution without a huge hit to power consumption or having to like make a whole brand new chip. So I think people more than anything were just kind of being like, this makes a ton of sense to be included in a Switch 2 rather than this is like, evidence of a Switch 2 being out there, if that makes sense.
Well, also adding some fuel to the direct rumor fires is that No More Heroes, for Switch in particular, was rated in Taiwan. And I think there's been some rumors that we would get that in another one of these little mini partner directs that, they'll show off just kind of like they did with Shin Megami Tensei, the new game and then an old game at the same time. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, there's been some trademark registration or re-registration. We'll talk about this maybe for Ocarina of Time, the Zelda game in Europe and Australia that's making people think something's going on there.
Yeah, I saw a tweet from Kelios basically that had a screenshot of the Australian patent board, trademark board. I'm not sure exactly what you call it. That showed Ocarina of Time listed as, and people thought it was a renewal at first, but then I've been hearing stories that this might be a new trademark that's been filed, both in Europe and in Australia, which has a lot of people thinking, this year is the 35th anniversary of Mario, and Super Mario Brothers, and next year will be the 35th anniversary of the Zelda franchise. So I think people are kind of putting two and two together and saying, hey, maybe this means that, there's going to be some sort of Ocarina of Time port or remake or something like that coming to the Switch.
So we will see if any of this stuff actually happens.
Yeah. I think if they do an Ocarina of Time port, I think it would be a full-on remake, personally. It would make sense to me for them to do like some sort of Final Fantasy VII remake treatment to it. I feel like those were like similarly, touchstone games, Final Fantasy VII and Ocarina of Time for their respective platforms. And we've already seen like an upgraded port on the 3DS. So it'd be weird to do like a port of a port. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The games that are kind of stuck in that blocky early 3D graphics,
right?
But really good games. So
yeah,
I mean, I would love to see a Ocarina of Time remake using the Breath of the Wild engine.
Yeah, that'd be incredible, right?
That would be.
It'd be, it would be great. You would have to figure out a way to still make it traditional, like Ocarina of Time, but still use the Breath of the Wild mechanic, which is if I can look over there, I want to go over there, I can climb that thing without ruining some of the surprises that you see in Ocarina of Time, since it's very linear.
Yeah, it'd be cool to like be able to scale like any side of Mount Doom that you want to go up. You know what I mean? And that's what it's called, right? I always confuse that and the mountain from Lord of the Rings. But yeah, I think that would be cool. I mean, obviously this is, you know what? No, this is true. And if it doesn't happen, you're not allowed to get mad at us.
Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild confirmed. Coming to Switch Pro release March of 2021.
So for what it's worth, I think you did mix them up. I think it's Death Mountain.
Death Mountain. That's right. Yeah. They're clearly
very similar.
Yeah. That's easy to happen.
Very similar. Mount Doom is in Mordor. That's how you remember it.
Thank you.
Before we move on past all this sort of weird direct speculation, August 6th being the investor meeting, any new feelings or thoughts? Do you think Nintendo's going to drop something on or before the 6th? Or do you think people are going to ask questions about it at the investor meeting? Like what are they doing? What's going on?
Do you have any thoughts?
Vitality sensor. It's finally going to make its debut. We've been waiting. The people are sedentary right now. We need it.
We need a Rob robotic operating buddy too, is what we need. I don't think we're going to get anything before the 6th. Although if it dropped on my birthday, that'd be tight. But I think we'll get something in August. I think there's no way we won't get something in August. We've been hearing way too much rumbling about that. I think Tiffany Treadmore was originally saying either the 3rd or the 11th. So I would, keep an eye on those days just in case. But I just think that just keep your expectations like as low as they possibly can be for the entire games industry for the rest of this year, and really honestly into next year, because a lot of the slowdown that's been happening with production is going to really have repercussions that go into next year. Right.
We may not be through the worst of this.
yeah. We'll see. November's gonna be just fucked. Also,
right now, go register to vote.
Yes,
everybody,
please do.
If you're in the USA, please register.
Yeah. And if you can't mail in your ballot, mail something to them anyway. They got to process it. That's how that works, right? But yeah, I think. I don't know. I hope we get something. I think we'll at least see those Mario games for the rest of the year. we'll see some of this third party stuff. Like we'll see No More Heroes. That game is still slated for 2020. We just don't have a hard release date yet. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, then we'll move on and some news that kind of touches on your birthday almost is the same here. Masahiro Sakurai had his 50th birthday, which is a big one. So happy birthday, Sakurai. We know he listens to the show, as always. So thank you for listening.
He's been listening since episode 1.
And that even got like trending on Twitter, I think. So that's good to see people. It's good to see Sakurai trending for good reasons, right?
Yeah.
David, you should get him to put you in Smash's DLC as a birthday gift.
Yeah. At the very least, he can send me a cameo or something.
He'll hit your Cash App up.
Yeah. I only have one subscriber on my OnlyFans, and it's Masahiro Sakurai. So.
And then I think we're going to move on to some Xbox and Sony, some Microsoft, Sony, PlayStation news and stuff. There was a rumor going around, and then it turned out to be true that Halo's online multiplayer is going to be free to play, at least some of it. I don't know if maybe it's all of it. Like this was some sort of toy store leaked an image, and then Microsoft came out and confirmed it. So that's interesting, right? Because we think about Xbox Gold being necessary to play online games. And then there's been some speculation because of that maybe Xbox Gold is going away and they're going to go all in on Game Pass, which I was thinking about. And Matt, like last week, you were talking about how you were able to convert your Gold to Game Pass, right? I'm wondering if that's not something related. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it feels like a sign that Xbox Live, as we know it, the $40, $50 a year as a service is going away, and everything's the online service and voice chat and party chat is all free. And then Game Pass is the service.
That's a really, really good move from Microsoft, if true. And it's seeming like it is true at this point. A lot of insiders have claimed that that's what they've heard, is that they're doing away with Xbox Live Gold. And I think that would be a major selling point for picking Xbox over PlayStation this upcoming console generation, especially with Game Pass being a thing where you get access to all these games for a very, very low price. I think that's a great move, and I really hope it's true. Also, Halo Infinite having free online multiplayer, like free to play multiplayer, is crazy. I never thought I'd see the day, honestly.
I mean, just what it could do for the player base is just insane to think about. There's some worries about if it's a free to play game, like Fortnite or Apex or any of the other free to play games. There's always, because it's free, you're more likely to have cheaters. But as long as there's a good anti-cheat process on dedicated servers, then we'll be fine.
Are you worried at all about an abundance of microtransactions or loot boxes or anything like that?
I think, I played Apex for a long time and didn't spend any money on any of the cosmetics. But I like Halo enough, and I like giant corporation, which is Microsoft. So I'm glad to give them my money to support their developers at 343.
Yeah,
because I like this franchise. But I wouldn't, depending on how those cosmetics appear and how much they are, then I could spend money or not.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's free, and it does great for the player base, and is another reason to use Game Pass.
And another thing that makes it seem like they're going all in with Game Pass is they just announced that the xCloud is going to be available to people who have Game Pass Ultimate. And is that another tier? I guess it is like the highest tier of Game Pass.
Yeah, Game Pass Ultimate up to this point has been $15 a month. I think it's going to stay at that. And you get free games on your Xbox, free games on your PC, and then now also get xCloud support for Android devices.
There are tiers. You have Xbox Game Pass Console, Xbox Game Pass PC, and then Ultimate is Console PC.
Gotcha.
As David said.
And like David said too, this is going to allow you to stream your games to certain tablets and phones and things like that, which seems like, inching in on Switch territory there, maybe a little bit. And also pretty cool that you'll be able to theoretically seamlessly be playing a game on your PC or your Xbox and then pick right back up on your smartphone,
Yeah, or just not have a PC or an Xbox and still be able to play all these games. I think that's the main thing. It's like I don't want to get like a really powerful PC just to play Microsoft Flight Simulator, but I sure as fuck want to play Microsoft Flight Simulator. You know what I mean? So this seems like the perfect.
It looks so good.
Yeah, I'm not even like a big Flight Simulator guy. I mean, I like Pilot Wings, but that's arcadey, right? Like the realistic flight sims have never really been my cup of tea, but this looks incredible. I've always wanted a game where that like utilizes the whole Earth, like Google Earth and Google Maps and that kind of idea. I think it's Bing Maps, unfortunately, that's being used here. But still, it's like that seems like perfect for Game Pass and xCloud, right? Is like being able to play that on anything without having to fully spec out your PC or download, terabytes of fucking maps, at all streams.
Yeah, it's dope. One thing about this xCloud stuff is that it's only coming to Android, so no iOS.
Yeah,
which is a bummer. I'm sure that has to do something with Apple's decisions in their service, Apple Arcade.
Right, totally.
And it's like a competing service, and so it's a big, huge bummer to hear that it's Android only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
to me,
as I understand, especially because like really, I feel like iPads kind of rule the tablet market for the most part.
Yep.
And iPad would be kind of the best platform to have this on, I think. But yeah, I think it's they don't allow like third party software platforms on their platforms, which makes sense. Hopefully they come around to that eventually, and they can make some under the table thing. Also, this has not been announced for PC yet or like Windows. Like right now, I think it's just Android. Correct?
I don't know.
I'm correct. I'm right. I watched it. Yeah. But either way, it looks cool, and they showed off a lot of like kind of cool accessories as well. Both kind of, I think 8-Bit Do has partnered with Microsoft for like xCloud specific controller. They've got kind of these grip things that attach to the side of the phones that really make your phone look like a Nintendo Switch. So we'll see how this goes. I've been only hearing great things so far about people in the xCloud beta. Here it's a lot better than Stadia. So looking forward to trying this out myself.
And I think it was last week, maybe, Matt, where you said, the console wars are kind of changing, where Microsoft is going all in for subscription stuff, and then Sony's going all in for exclusives. And to that point, in the upcoming Avengers game, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of exclusive things for the PlayStation version, and most notably Spider-Man, a playable character, an important Avenger, is only on the PlayStation version. And I know this is rubbing a lot of people the wrong way as being anti-consumer and stuff. Is that how y'all feel about it?
This is such a bummer to me. Spider-Man, one of the most popular comic book characters and most popular, possibly Marvel character, is gone from other versions of this game. Spider-Man will be on PC or the Xbox version of the Avengers game. Can you imagine a world where you got Street Fighter, you're playing Street Fighter, but there's no Ryu or Ken, or like a Mortal Kombat where there's no Scorpion? These cross-platform games, it's just such a weird decision. And I think it's a bummer to see this. People are going to buy this game if they have a PlayStation already. But I think it shows what Sony is going to do for the next 3 or 4 years, which is pick up all these exclusives, because they will probably have the installation base and people are going to do it. And it bums me out personally.
Yeah. This is fucking bullshit is what it is, honestly. Whenever I read this news, it just made me like really mad, because it reminds me of this is like 2008 video game stuff. You know what I mean? This reminds me of like Xbox 360, PS3 era like anti-consumer tactics. You know what I mean? And not only this, like there's apparently also going to be retailer specific stuff as well. Like I think Amazon has like locked exclusivity on certain items, you know, that are cosmetic or whatnot. But whatever it is, you know, we're in this era now where everybody's playing nice. You know, a lot of these games that are cross-platform are able to be played online cross-platform for the first time. We've been trending towards this era, and like you just referenced, Patrick, when we were talking about last week, it's like everybody has got their own kind of piece of the pie that they're going after this generation, right? So you would think that this kind of behavior wouldn't be necessary, you know, and it's just such a bummer to see this kind of stuff because I don't know, you just thought we'd grown out of it at this point. And another thing too is that how much of an impact is Spider-Man going to have in the story if he's only on one console? You know what I mean? Like, is this going to like totally nerf anything that they could do with that character because they're not going to spend development time making like two completely separate game stories on different consoles? You know,
maybe
like
a little side story or something.
Yeah, it's just kind of pointless. It's like, why, you know, if it's such an important character and he's so popular and everybody wants him, wouldn't you want to like give the amount of proper time and care into like making him a part of the Marvel universe like he so clearly is? You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just frustrating.
So y'all are very, I guess I'm a little more like, I'm not as upset about this. Like, I'm not surprised. I'm not also like, is Star Fox being in that Ubisoft game or the same? You know what I mean? It made the Nintendo version of that, you know, have its own side quest or whatever.
I don't think that's the same at all. That's a Nintendo owned character. You know what I mean?
But Sony owns a lot of rights to Spider-Man. Like they own just film rights.
They own the movie rights.
Yeah. They own the movie rights. I mean, Spider-Man was in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 on the Switch.
Right. Because sure. And I mean, but like the Spider-Man game was a PlayStation exclusive, and were people upset about that? Like I guess I don't see the outrage as much personally, but I maybe it also is because I don't really care that much about this game, despite liking comics. And
allow us to explain it to you again. Here we go. I just think if we did this with other characters, because Spider-Man is treated differently because it's such a popular character, because we had all those Marvel rights in the late 90s, early 2000s when Marvel was having a really hard time. So they licensed all their stuff. And so because of that struggle, that we're in this like weird legal area exclusivity.
Yeah.
But if you apply this rule to other video games, it doesn't really work. Like, imagine playing a Sonic game without Tails.
Or Tails is only on the Xbox.
Right, exactly.
Man, here's the thing. The Avengers has had a huge rotating cast since 1960, whatever, the first, you know.
Oh, here comes Mr. Marvel over here.
Well, like, I guess I just don't think it's like, oh, this is some critical character. I don't know. It just, people seem really upset about it, and I see lots of corollaries that people are like dismissing, like the Star Fox thing and stuff, and I don't get it entirely.
I think it's different, right? Like the Star Fox, like Nintendo owns the Star Fox IP, and for this specific game, they were able to add stuff in on their platform with something that they owned. And I understand what you're saying about Spider-Man being an exclusive for PlayStation, but I think that that's a little bit different. I think like that was like who did that's Insomniac who did the Spider-Man game.
I think you're right. Yeah,
like they only make PlayStation games. You know, like that was a whole different sort of situation. Like this is a big third-party game that's going to multiple platforms, I think for me it's about what the precedent that this sets at the very beginning of this console generation.
Are we upset that Final Fantasy VII Remake was a Sony exclusive or a timed exclusive or whatever it is?
I think we never got any news that Final Fantasy VII Remake was a timed exclusive, and for that matter, how long that time might be. But I think they said it was exclusive, but didn't say how long that might be.
But I mean, like, are you as equally upset about that as this? Like,
no, I'm not. I think for me, the reason that this upsets me is that they took something at the beginning where they're like, this game is coming out for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, and then they chopped it up part and parcel, and they're throwing little bits out to each individual one.
Is it the timing then?
Yeah,
it's probably it's a messaging.
Yeah, it's messaging, it's timing. It's also just like, hey, you want to buy this game? Great. If you're on Xbox, fuck you. You don't get to play the full game. You know what I mean? At no cost to PlayStation owners, they get more of a game than the Xbox people do. And it just doesn't make sense. It's like, then just pick a platform for it to go on. You know what I mean? But doing this thing where it's like, oh, hey, it's for everybody and we're all playing nice with everybody. And then they pull this shit. It's just like, it's just tired, and I'm tired of seeing it. And I thought we were past this personally.
Yeah.
Square's got to have something going on with Sony, right? Between Final Fantasy and this, right? Like they've got to be. Maybe not. They do exclusives for other people too, I guess.
I don't know.
All right, we'll move on. I've badgered y'all enough.
It's Crystal Dynamics.
Yeah. I do think what Sony did was true, which is like, Crystal Dynamics, Sony is like, hey, we'll give you $10 million to develop Spider-Man for your game, but Spider-Man is only coming to Sony. And if they would have said that, back in whenever they announced the game last year, that is exclusive and that they put up the money to it, just like Nintendo said, they put up the money to publish a Marvel Ultimate Alliance and to push that, I think that would probably quell some of our anger that we're now spent 10 minutes talking about.
I also think people are just fucking fed up with Sony's handling of the Spider-Man franchise in general.
That's
I think
fair.
that they've refused to play nice with this franchise. They've just held it on with their greedy little grubby hands, and they won't listen to what people want. People want Spider-Man to be a part of the MCU. And they really want, I don't really care that much. I mean, I think the MCU movies are fine, but I'm not like a huge Marvel fanboy. But it's like, at the same time, it's like, yo, give a little bit. You guys are making a ton of money with these Spider-Man movies. How much more do you need? And I think this is just like another thing of Sony, just like, it's just immeasurable greed. Anyway, sorry. I'm not that.
Yeah.
Cina, do you care about this?
I mean, I can see where you're coming from, where like what the point you made earlier is that like, if you're going to do platform exclusives, like it should just be bonus content, but this feels more significant than just bonus content. And that's where it feels like it's a little, it leaves a bad taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
Like I think back to like Soul Calibur 2 had exclusive characters for every console, but they're like bonus characters, right? Like it was more of like an homage to each platform,
right?
But like it's only the PlayStation that I don't know too much about this, but it sounds like it's only PlayStation that's getting bonus content, and then the other platforms are getting nothing.
That's right.
So like I don't know. It just I could see like why it would make people upset for sure. Personally, I don't really care about it that much, but yeah.
At least throw the Xbox owners Spawn or something like that if we're going to go with that.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're going to do like platform exclusive bonus content, like spread it around, but
yeah.
All right. Well, we talked about that for far longer than we intended to. But.
Well, Patrick, we're passionate about Spider-Man and pro-consumer rights.
That's right.
For sure.
The Better Business Bureau up in this bitch.
We should have ended with that topic and not this next one, which is that Sony's doing a State of Play on August 6th. And there's not going to be a whole lot there. It sounds like they are telling us to temper our expectations. No PlayStation Studios updates, no PlayStation 5 hardware info or anything or pre-order info. So I guess just stuff about third party and already announced games. I don't know.
Yeah, it's also mostly PS4 and PSVR related and not PS5 at all. So interesting.
And if you're listening to this podcast, I guess that comes out on the 6th, so tomorrow, if you're listening to this when it comes out, or it may have already happened.
Or maybe you're listening to this on November 1st, 2020, when you still have no idea what day or what the price will be on any of these new fucking systems.
Yeah, I think that's possible.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're listening to this the day after Avengers came out and you're mad that Spider-Man is not on other systems.
Or you find out that the Spider-Man story sucks anyway. And so
yeah, exactly.
Well, I think we should stop there. That's the news and rumors for the week. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk all about motion controls. All right, so we're going to be talking today all about motion controls in video games. Like Matt said up top, we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the history of it. And in particular, we'll talk about Nintendo's approach to it, which is one of the big motion controls things out there, and kind of best and worst use of motion controls, all that kind of stuff. Talk about our personal feelings on it and more. So before we get into anything, just to get the lay of the land, how do all of us feel about motion controls? We hinted at it a little bit up the top. Cina, how do you feel about motion controls?
I don't really like them all that much. I was psyched for the Wii when it came out, and then it just the more I played it, the more I was like, man, I want a regular controller. I just want to press buttons. I don't mind like thoughtful inclusions of like little splashes of motion controls here and there, but like I can't say I love it altogether. I'll elaborate on that, but I'll give everyone else a chance.
And I think also one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this now is you said thoughtful inclusion. And I think Paper Mario, the Origami King, arguably does that. And that was one of the reasons I think that we decided to do this episode now is kind of the Switch's motion controls era. But I'm sorry, I cut somebody off. Somebody else, how do you feel about motion controls?
No, it's okay. Yeah, I am a little more positive on motion controls than you are, Cina. But I'm not, it's not like I love them and I want them in every game or anything like that. I just think that motion controls can lead to unique and creative ways of interacting with a game space. I think, going back to like WarioWare Twisted for the Game Boy Advance, that's one of my favorite games of all time, honestly. And it's like the reason that I actually like paid for an emulator on my phone for Game Boy Advance is because you can use the gyro in the phone, right, to play the game. And I think that game like used them in such a creative way, but it wasn't like the waggle motion controls of the Wii era.
Yeah, it just ended up being shoehorned into so many games unnecessarily. But yeah, continue.
Agreed. Yeah, and I think, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, a little bit later as well, but I think that the Wii, I think, has tainted motion controls for an entire generation of gamers. And I think that like motion controls have become synonymous with like flicking your wrist really quickly in order to swing a sword in Twilight Princess, where they can be done far more subtly and more immersively if done correctly, which I think that we've really graduated into these days. But yeah, that's kind of where I stand with motion controls. I don't think they're necessary, but I generally use them whenever they're available.
What about you, Matt?
I think generally I like motion controls. It reminds me of playing different types of games in the arcade growing up. Playing DDR or sports simulator games or anything that kind of simulate some real world event or real world sport or game. Also, I like motion controls for its accessibility.
Yeah.
And I think to the Wii, when I can hand someone a Wii controller and they can watch me play and intuitively they can know how to play Wii bowling.
Mm-hmm.
Where as I introduce, gaming to people that I care about, so we can play games while we're all like living from home. To see someone really struggle with a controller, like complex controls, mostly for like Sony games or Microsoft games, any first-person shooter, there's like 12 buttons, and watching a person learn those controls is really hard, and teaching someone is also equally hard unless the game kind of expects existing gamers to know how to use a controller. So I love motion controls just for that it makes it so some games really accessible if it's a simulation.
Yeah, I agree about like Wii Bowling and Wii Sports in general. I think is like a brilliant use case of motion controls. But I think what it comes down to, especially for like Wii Sports and games like that, is like those games are based on physics, and so it's about the like how precise can you get with your motion controls, and like how consistent can you be with your motion controls, and so like that's where the gameplay aspect really comes in. But when it's like the more and more you abstract away from the particular movements and the consistency of the movements that you're making, as you like pull back, and it's just like you flick a wrist and it becomes like waggle to if it's becoming a proxy for a button press, it's just a lot more inaccurate, and like the travel between when that registers, I think that's when it starts to fall apart for me.
Totally.
So I think I would agree with the general statements that motion controls have their good uses, and then I would kind of agree when we'll talk about it more when we get the Wii that maybe that kind of spoiled motion controls. The sort of general consensus seems to be that, you know, it's motion controls are for casuals. Hardcore gamers are real resistant to them and prefer a controller or a keyboard and mouse or whatever. And I think that you kind of hinted at why there, Cina. Like, you know, when you have to swing every time to swing a sword, that gets frustrating. But let's
can we take 1 second though and just like consider the idea that using a mouse is motion controls?
Oh, totally.
It's like you're moving your hand around way more than you are when you're using two sticks, right?
That's like a great point.
I just don't see what the big complaint is, but we'll get to that.
And then maybe it's smaller movements and you're used to it or whatever. I think there's something about that too, right? Like we're used to using controllers, and maybe we'll talk about that more, but I thought we could quickly go over the history of this. And I don't know, you know, I found a Giant Bomb article that kind of suggested that the first use of motion control in gaming is from a Sega 1976 boxing game, arcade game, Heavyweight Champ. And the kind of history there would be then, you know, you have motion controls in racing games like motorcycle arcade games where you're on a, you know, fake plastic motorbike and you
kind of tilting. Yeah.
You lean. And so it kind of comes from that arcade. And I think that's another great use of motion controls, right? Like that arcade experience.
That's where we saw the first real the first real introduction of virtual reality, right? It was like, you know, those tank games that you would like bring down to your head and kind of look through and stuff like that. Yeah. Arcades is where they were really trying out a lot of this early tech.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine like walking up into like an arcade game and having a controller and walking you through what all the buttons on a controller do?
Yeah, exactly.
Like what arcades do really well is they try to simulate something and that a person can walk up to it and know how to play that game really quickly and want to consistently play that game, with the obvious exception of like fighting games with combos.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, do we consider like the Wii pointer, like the IR stuff, do we consider that to be motion controls?
Yeah. There's definitely some questions about what is a motion control, right? Like David pointed out, the mouse and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent.
Walking back from that, like, do we consider light gun games to be motion controlled?
Right. I think there's an argument to be made that it is. And it's like anything, we can spend a lot of time trying to define it, but I think, like light gun is another arguable motion controls, and that was one of the NES had one. I mean, there obviously are the arcade games. There was the power pad for the NES, which is maybe not what we think of motion controls now, but required you to move to do things.
There's a great video by the gaming historian about an accessory for the NES called the NES Hot Seat, which was quite literally a chair that you sat in that would tilt around, that you could control any of your games through basically by tilting your entire body. That's a very interesting video to check out if you haven't seen that yet.
That's cool. Yeah, but I think when we talk about motion controls, at least without getting in the nitty gritty, I think we're talking about Wii era stuff. And there was some stuff leading up to it, or that's where it really is solidified is what we mean by motion controls.
Gyroscope stuff. Yeah.
And like there was some stuff leading up to it. I'm not terribly familiar with this one. I think, David, you posted something about this in our chat. The N64 had like some accessory.
Yeah. I mean, I only really wanted to bring this up because I would always see this in gaming magazines when I was a kid, but it was basically this like peripheral that you would plug into the Rumble Pack port on the N64 controller. It's just called the N64 Tilt Pack. And I'll post on our social and our Instagram story or something an image of this ad, but it's a guy just like fucking freaking out, like tilting his N64 controller while playing Star Fox or something like that. And I always thought that looked so cool. But apparently it didn't work very well, if at all. But stuff like that showed that there was like a hunger for it before we eventually got to the Wii era. And I know they experimented with the stuff as early as the GameCube and R&D.
Yeah.
I mean, you see like kids, they'll like, when they're playing like Mario Kart or whatever, they'll just instinctually like turn the controller as if that's, making like before they added, tilt controls to Mario Kart, like
totally
kids would just instinctively do that.
Every girlfriend I've ever had has done that.
Yeah. Novice, for lack of a better word, like new gamers or whatever. That's a very common thing. My son does it. My wife does it.
So it is like an intuitive thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. And then, like at the GameCube, they experimented with stuff that eventually became the Wii, right? And the Wii is where we have to stop and take a longer discussion because this is where it starts to get a lot more nuanced, right? And like Wii Sports, we all agree was a really great experience. Like you talked about some good reasons why of it being physics based and all that. But then there are other games. I mean, there's so many motion controls games. It's like, this is where it went from novelty to overkill or whatever, right? Like in the span of a few years. And then I think about like Skyward Sword, like that game. I loved playing that game, but I kind of gave up on it because of the motion controls. It just became too much. Really? And I think and I have cubital tunnel, and for whatever reason, playing with a nunchuck and that awkward bar controller for the Wii caused me to have hand pain and stuff.
Well, we've got
that game.
Even within the Wii, there was a big evolution of motion controls, right? And even within Wii Sports, there was a big evolution of motion controls. So like when the Wii launched, it was just straight up waggle controls, right? Like swinging your arm like this. I mean, you can't see on the podcast, but swinging it all the way across your body would be the same as slightly flicking your wrist, right? All it really took into account is that motion was happening. Really. Right. It didn't really even sense if it was going up or down, just that you were moving the controller at all. And I think that everybody thought beforehand, before the Wii came out, that, to swing and play Wii tennis, you'd be swinging your arm and hitting it, and backhand and forehand would have the same amount of blah, 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 blah. And that didn't end up being the case. And I think that let a lot of people down. I think that it was good for accessibility for a lot of these old grannies and grandpas that were playing Switch or playing video games for the first time with the Wii. Like it was good for them.
Hey, watch it. Are you calling me an old granny?
Hey man, I got hyped for the Wii before it came out. Don't worry about it. But like, and then, obviously Twilight Princess was that way, where it's like a lot of people prefer the GameCube version because they don't have to kind of arbitrarily flick their wrist whenever they're trying to swing their sword. Right. But then whenever the Wii Motion Plus came out, which was like an add-on to the actual console, that gave you that 1-to-1 actual gyroscopic control, where in Skyward Sword, if you moved your wrist around, you could see Link in game holding the sword like you were holding the sword. And I think that if the Wii had launched with that, I think that we would be in a way different place with motion controls today than where we are, where you have so many like quote unquote hardcore gamers totally shunning the idea of motion controls because they associate it with that early Wii stuff where there was no like proper input whatsoever. I mean, Wii Sports Resort is an incredible display of motion controls. You talk about Wii Sports being good. Wii Sports Resort was incredible. Like the table tennis game in that is like, it feels like you're playing real table tennis, and I think there's just, I just think it was a kind of a wasted opportunity to not have that tech out at the beginning. I wish they had it out at the beginning. I think we'd be in a different kind of world right now if it had been.
That totally makes sense. Any other specific? I mean, the Wii. It's just like it's such a big era of, and it's such a big turning point for motion controls. Is there any moment you can pinpoint where it was like, people went from excited about motion controls to shitting on motion controls, like in that era?
Cina, you brought up a good one earlier.
So Donkey Kong Country Returns. Unfortunately, I can't play that game for Wii because they mapped the roll, which is like, the roll and jump mechanic is like crucial to playing Donkey Kong games. And to roll, you waggle the Wii remote, and I just kept rolling. I was like trying to roll and jump over holes to like jump further, and then I would just roll straight into the hole and like, die. And it was so frustrating because I really wanted to play Donkey Kong Country Returns.
Yeah,
I love Donkey Kong Country, and I just kept dying because it wasn't registering the timing of when my roll got registered just wasn't consistent. And it was just I was so sad. I like consider, I don't know if that game supported the classic controller. Does anyone remember?
I don't think so, because I remember when that game was ported to 3DS, that was the first time that you could actually roll and jump like you would on the Super Nintendo.
Right. Exactly.
They actually, they like fixed it basically, but then you're playing it at 240p or whatever the 3DS was.
So I was like, that was the moment when I was just like, motion controls. Why?
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
think that when we get into the Switch era, well, this might come up, or maybe this is a good seg for that. But like,
maybe this is what you're going to say is, give me the option to turn it off or turn it on. It feels like an option like that, or like Donkey Kong Country, where the user is probably used to playing that game with a controller, that you can go into an option and say, I want to use motion controls. No. And then just play that you normally would. And anything where it feels really close, or it feels easy to make an option change, should allow the user to change it in the settings.
100% what I was basically going to say, right? Like, obviously, like a dance game shouldn't have that option, or an exercise game, or even Wii Sports maybe, or something like that. But like, if it's a role in a platforming game, let me turn that on or off.
Agreed. And you've got on here for the Wii U Star Fox Zero, right?
Yeah,
like that's a really good example of that as well, where not only were the motion controls shoehorned into the experience, but also like being forced to look at the gamepad instead of the TV was forced on the player. And I think that turned a bunch of people off, myself included. Because I mean, that's probably for me the game where motion controls fucked me up most. Because I played a ton of Star Fox for the Super Nintendo when I was a kid. Played a ton of Star Fox 64, even the GameCube Star Fox games. I played all those. And so like having to learn this brand new system in what's essentially a Star Fox 64 remake just like broke my brain. I tried to play that game for like 3 or 4 days and I could never get the controls down, and I had to put it down. So that was a huge barrier to entry for me personally.
Yeah, I think it's that game where, like we're talking about, where it's not common or doesn't make as much sense to have motion controls, or any game that's longer, any game where a play session is potentially going to be an hour plus is probably not a game for motion controls, unless it's an exercise game or something, right? Like, I think that's maybe a guideline that should be considered or whatever. Or
it also made that game like totally unportable. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, well, okay, not portable, like you can take it with you, but like you can't port that game to Switch now because like it needs the 2 screens, it needs the motion controls. You'd have to completely redesign that game from the ground up. Not like Nintendo went into the Wii U thinking, oh, this is only going to be around for 3 years. Let's make all the games be able to be put on other platforms. But it's like that game is kind of a relic of the Wii U now, and that's kind of where it's going to live and die. At least I'd imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe we can jump up to the Switch era and we can kind of talk about the current, while we're focusing on Nintendo, the current state of motion controls and what they've been doing. And I think it's really kind of solidified by this Paper Mario game, but the exception being ARMS, but ARMS does have the option to play with buttons, and that's how I play ARMS. As you all know, I like ARMS a lot, but I played the motion controls in ARMS to get the badge, and then I switched back to button controls. But I think it's arguably a good use of motion controls. ARMS is like there's top players that play with motion controls, and
that's how I play ARMS.
Kind of like how you were talking about, David, too. It's not something where you have to punch all the way from your body out. You can do slight movements. Again, people can't see us, but just a very slight punch forward with your hand of inches registers, and so that's a little more manageable.
Patrick, can I try and corner you with a question?
Yes. Corner me.
Would you like ARMS as much as you do now if it was only motion controls and didn't give you the option to go to buttons?
Probably not. I mean,
fair.
I think I would have been more resistant to playing it. Okay, you know what I mean?
That's how Nintendo wanted that game to be originally, until someone was like, yo, we cannot do this anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because people have been burned by this, I'm sure that was a late addition, was figuring out how to do the map it to controller, or maybe it wasn't, but it's I feel like someone had to learn from the Wii era, and people, having that stigma against it, So it's good that they have the option in that game, because I like both. You're right. I think it's a little more precise with buttons, but there's also stuff you can do with motion controls that you can't really do if you're playing with buttons,
There are advantages to each in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did Splatoon 1. I never played Splatoon 1. Did it have gyro aiming on the Wii U?
Yeah.
It probably did. So I think, we can't give that credit to the Switch, but obviously Splatoon 2 also has gyro aiming. And that's a pretty good use of motion controls, right? We all agree.
Yeah.
Most people agree that's like using a mouse, kind of like you talked about. It's not an extreme motion control, right? It's a very slight, you just kind of,
I think so.
Adjust your controller.
I think Splatoon 2 having motion controls that work better than stick controls. And I think that's my opinion, but I also think that's pretty objective.
Consensus opinion, it seems.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know a lot of people personally that don't play with the motion controls at all, right? They just use the twin stick setup. But I think in a game like Splatoon, where you're spraying streams of paint everywhere, being able to flick it around really quickly and have the physics kind of affect where it goes depending on how you move the controller, I think it's the best way to play. And I think most of the pros play like that. I think Splatoon 2 is the reason that we see most first person shooters that come to Switch have gyro aiming included in the game. And it's games get blowback, from the community if they don't have gyro aiming included, and they'll usually be patched in if not, you know what I mean? And I think that
to even go back to your point, even more, David, is for any kind of precision game, especially first person shooters, anytime you move your fingers from a button to a joystick to a joystick to a button, that amount of time you're losing, and it puts you at a disadvantage where you might die or get hit or get more damage caused to you, because it's causing your brain to think more, and it's a more cognitive load, which may be decreasing your play. And so intuitively, as you move the Switch, it is more precise, but it's also less of a mental load, and more time that you can have to be more precise with your shots.
Yeah, and that's
why. Good.
Yeah, it just reminds me of mouse and keyboard controls, right? It's I always overcorrect when I'm aiming, or if I've never been good at sniping in first person games where it has twin stick controls, right? Because I'll go too far and then I have to overcorrect and then I'm dead by the time I get it right. Right. But I love shooters that have a combination of stick and motion controls, because then I get to basically where I need to be with the stick. And then I get the fine tuning last minute, aiming with the motion to get it exactly where I need to be. And I get headshots so much easier when there's gyro aiming included. I don't understand why PlayStation 4 games don't include this as well, since DualShock 4 is more than capable of doing that kind of stuff.
I wonder if we will see more of it on other platforms, on Xbox and PlayStation. But then quickly, to round out sort of the Switch era, I think we got to talk about Super Mario Odyssey, Zelda Breath of the Wild, and Paper Mario, the Origami King, and what they've done with motion controls, which is where it's sort of minor aspects of the game. And Paper Mario, the Origami King might be a little different than the other two, but like there's just tiny things. Like in Breath of the Wild, there's some shrines where you had to do motion controls to solve a puzzle. And in Mario Odyssey, there was a couple of, like, if you do a little waggle, you get a little bit of extra jump, a little bit of height, which was required for some of the stars, and that kind of a thing. And so I think that's where Nintendo's kind of landing on motion controls in these first party games that maybe don't need gyro aiming or aren't built around it, to have a little bit of a finesse with it. And I think that's pretty cool. I know some people hate the motion control shrines, and I can get that. It might feel more out of place there than it does in the Mario
I hate
games.
the motion control shrines.
Is it because it just feels out of place and like frustrating in a weird mini game?
Yeah, it's just fucking stupid because like you have to, in order to do that one, you have to like turn it completely 100% like upside down and twist it. And it's just not natural and it's not subtle, right? It's like
it's not
completely flipping the console. And it's like, I played Breath of the Wild on Wii U. And so that was fine because I could still look at the screen, like the TV, as I've got like my gamepad upside down. But if you're playing handheld or you're playing on a Switch Lite, you got to like go under the thing in order to fucking see what you're doing when you're flipping it upside down. So I think that one was pretty bad, but I think the other ones are subtle enough to where it doesn't bother me.
Yeah. And in
Cina, what do you think about motion controls in Breath of the Wild?
At first I didn't really realize that like the bow and arrow was being aimed by the gyros, and so like
that's fair point.
For a little while when I first started playing the game, I was like, why can't I like aim correctly? And then it like dawned on me that it's the gyro that's throwing me off. And then like once I understood that that's what was happening, I could like make a little tweak with the gyro and like correct my aim a little bit. And then it became kind of.
Did you keep it on?
I don't remember. I probably kept it on for a bit. I maybe turned it off for a bit. It never like really bothered me once I realized it was there. But I don't know. It threw me off at first. And it, like the thing is, sometimes it was a little jittery, and that might just be because I'm like, I'm just like maybe a little jittery with the controller. I don't know if it's me or if it's like accuracy of the Joy-Con or what, but I don't know. It was it didn't hinder me. I'll say that.
Yeah, I think I having had played the 3DS remakes of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, those also utilized gyro for aiming the bows and slingshot and stuff like that. So I was already kind of ready. It just felt like second nature. But I can totally see being confused by that. Like Sasha the other day was doing the whole bit where you ride on Prince Sidon's back, and there's a lot of aiming involved in that section. And I think that it took her a while also to realize like, oh, I can fucking tilt in order to aim. So yeah, I can see that being an issue.
Yeah, Super Mario Odyssey, I don't think it ever really bothered me. I think I got the hang of it pretty quick, and it like it's ironic though, because like that is also a platformer, and it didn't bother me at all, but like it completely stopped me from playing Donkey Kong Country Returns. I wonder why.
It wasn't a critical.
Yeah,
it wasn't a critical move.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the main jump or mechanic that it did it. And I think
that'd be like if you had to run in Mario Odyssey, you had to like go like this.
Yeah. And then I think that's why Paper Mario Origami King does it pretty well. Is it's not a anytime you have to do motion controls is not like a stressful moment. It's usually a fun, rewarding moment almost. And I think that's a good note too, right? Like it never felt like a chore when it like it might have in the Breath of the Wild shrine or something. But I think that
it felt good to do with the Pro controller in that game too. Like, because I've been playing that. My Joy-Cons, by the way, for people that are still wondering, are still out.
Oh, no.
No word from Nintendo on when I'm getting this back. But it's like the Pro controller does motion controls really great. And the thing with Paper Mario though, for me, like I like the implementation of motion controls in that, but you can't argue that that's not shoehorned in. You know what I mean? Like it feels good to do the 1,000-fold arms or whatever they're called. But it's like,
Is it necessary?
You could delete that entirely from the game and it would be the same game. You know what I mean? It's like, you're right. It's like a little treat and it's inoffensive, but it's also not like a great argument for motion controls, I think, because it adds really nothing to the game.
I think that's true of the other ones too, right?
Yeah.
Maybe absent the aiming of, arrows and stuff.
It helps with arrows. Yeah.
But I think then that's just seems like what they're doing. And with Nintendo, that is. And then maybe we can move on and, in order for this not to go on too long, just kind of quickly cover, obviously there was copycat stuff of Xbox Kinect and PlayStation Move. And both of those, the Kinect did pretty well, I guess, at first, at least. And there was a lot of cool stuff with that. I mean, I feel like it's a shame that failed because it could read your whole body. And there were some cool games where you could, move in the room and it would know where to, like, sort of mini games and stuff. You're shaking your head, David.
Microsoft got too big brothery with the Xbox and it made people really uncomfortable, like having a microphone listening to them at all times. Yeah. And I think they tried to do the thing that Nintendo did by shoehorning it into everything. And they didn't have the casual market there to foster that in. And so Xbox Kinect is all but dead at this point. I don't think that the Series X is going to have Kinect functionality at all, as far as I understand.
Right. Which I think is kind of a shame because it was a sort of different technology that had interesting use cases that we don't have anymore.
Also, Kinect is racist. It just can't see black people. So that's like a pretty big problem. Like you have to have perfect lighting conditions if you're anything less than like 100% Caucasian. Yeah, so like it's very bad. It's caused
That's
issues.
So weird because I thought that Kinect is like depth sensors.
I don't know. Yeah.
Like that.
You'd think so.
I should read about that.
It's a little bit of both. It's like it's pretty revolutionary tech, and in fact, I've used Kinect in all the ways that it's not meant to be used. Like I've used it for 3D renderings of images for some like an older company that I used to work for, and I used it to capture photogrammetry data for a VR experience that I was working on. But just like I never like played Just Dance with it, It just wasn't really up my alley, I guess.
And there's also the Sony iToy before that's like kind of a more rudimentary version of that. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off, Patrick.
No.
I mean, that was used in tandem with the PlayStation Move controllers, which are essentially Wiimotes with balls on the end.
Yeah, didn't the iToy release for PS2 like the first version of it before PS Move came out for PS3?
Yeah, sure did.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
When I like around the year 2000 or like 1999 or something, I remember this is like when webcams, or at least when they first became sort of mainstream. And I had this like Intel webcam and it came with some software that had like a few like very, very like rudimentary motion control games. Like there would be like a basketball game where like there's a ball that's bouncing around on the screen and it detects you like touching the ball and knocking it. And if it goes into the hoop that's like on the other side of the screen, then you get a point. Like, I don't know. At the time I thought that was like really amazing. And then like, that's essentially like what I guess sort of evolved into things like the iToy and the Kinect. Yeah.
I would like 1999 Cina to talk to, what is it, 2007 Cina, as he tries to play Donkey Kong Returns.
Well, then just real briefly too, mobile games use motion controls, especially just gyro and stuff like that. And so it's
because they don't have buttons.
That too, right? Yeah. That's why
they have to.
But like, I just wanted to, talk about what are the best case uses for motion controls. What are some of the best motion control games? I think we kind of covered a little bit of this, gyro aiming, dance exercise, casual short mini games are great uses for motion controls. And David, you mentioned the dancing on the Kinect. It's like that versus a Wiimote or a Switch controller is so much better because it reads your whole body. Sure. That's why I think the Kinect is missed. But what do y'all think are some of the best motion control games or uses are?
I want to give a shout out to WarioWare on the Wii. I think that's a really good use of the Wii Remote. It's just fun, and it's like it actually adds new ways to play. I think that's like a lot of what's used as the justification for motion controls. It's like that it unlocks new gameplay possibilities. I think when it's used as a proxy for a button press, that is less so, because then it feels more shoehorned. But when it's like, when the game is kind of built around motion control aspects and doing things that only really make sense to do with, tilt controls or gyroscope controls, or accelerometer controls for that matter, I think that's where it really shines. And I just remember like being delighted constantly. WarioWare is just like a totally delightful game in and of itself, but like,
that's the franchise where you want to experiment with new shit.
Yeah, totally. And I never played 1-2 Switch, but it feels like maybe that has sort of the same elements. David is making the jack off hand motion.
David is doing a jerk off. Yeah.
Let's all explain what David's doing.
Well,
David was like doing a jerk off motion.
There's literally the mini game where you're doing
the cow
motion over and over again. That game was fucking stupid. That should have been built into the Switch for free instead of a $50 game. But I mean, do you have one, Matt, or do you mind if I kind of move us past it?
No, please go ahead.
I think that the Switch has done a really, really good job of having the argument for motion controls, right? Like realistically, what people think of when they think of motion controls is they think of wagging their arms around like an idiot, throwing their controllers into TVs, like all that kind of stuff. But realistically, what's happening is you're moving your hand like almost imperceptibly as you're holding the controller, right? To get minute little changes into what you're doing. And of course, you can flip it around and do whatever you want, but you're not going to even have the amount of precision that you need in order to do a lot of controls. So I think that I hope that Microsoft and Sony can take some lessons from Nintendo on how they've implemented motion controls into, say, games like Splatoon 2 and shooters that come out on the Switch, because I think it would destigmatize it a little bit for the, quote unquote hardcore gamers that are out buying the other platforms. But I think if it's all right with you, I think we have to talk about VR.
Yeah,
because I think that
hardcore
VR,
gamers.
Yeah, VR is the culmination of motion controls, right? Like VR is like putting the game inside your eyeballs and then using your whole body as the controller. And no one complains about motion controls in VR, right? Like
hardcore gamers love it.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's immersion, right? Like you look at any of the big VR headsets, they're all basically using Wii Motion Pluses as their controllers, right? And it's like that's where motion controls are going. And that's, I think, what Nintendo was trying to push everything towards back in the Wii era, was fostering in this new way to use your body to play video games. And I think that is the culmination. And you can't, when you play a VR game with a standard 2-stick controller, it just feels wrong. Right. And you're very limited. But then when you have this room scale approach to VR, and you're using your whole body, you're making motions, you're drawing and painting in VR apps. Like that's where the future is. And it's just like, obviously the VR crowd doesn't have the stigma of motion controls like attached to them. It's just kind of like eventually kind of bringing these two crowds together and opening up the possibilities for controlling games in general.
Have any of y'all tried to play Beat Saber with a controller?
No.
No,
because you can't. It is a motion control game.
Right, but people don't talk about it like that. They talk about it as a VR game, and I think that's an interesting distinction that isn't real.
It's just motion controls with the screen strapped to your face. Like that's all VR is. I don't know. It's I just think it gets a bad rap, and I think that if the other companies like treated it the way that VR companies do and Nintendo does, I think it would be destigmatized. But of course, you still need to have the option, right? If you don't want to play that way, you don't have to. That's the goal, I think.
Yeah, with VR games, like the motion controls are 1-to-1, like for real. And I had mentioned before, like where it falls apart is like the more you abstract away the motion like the further away you get from one-to-one, the less immersive it becomes and the more gimmicky it feels. So I do agree with you, David, in that like VR is the ultimate culmination of that, because it's like the most pure one-to-one representation of like motion controls that are I guess possible. I don't know. So I think that they're cool there.
Awesome. I think that's a really good place for us to end this discussion, unless y'all have any other, things you want to add in, because I think VR is motion controls and it's the future and all that. So
just one last thing, maybe what we talked about is, David, you were talking about like the stigma for motion controls. Like there's stigma from the gamer base, but also stigma for like feeling silly and feeling weird to like, even in VR. I remember when I first started playing VR, it's like, I don't know how I'm looking, but I also know that I'm looking like an idiot with this screen strapped to my face while I'm waggling at something that someone else can't see. So I'm having a good time, but I'm also feeling self-conscious that I'm looking like a fucking idiot.
That reminds me of when my son played Ring Fit Adventure for the first time. I looked at my wife and I was like, look, he looks so ridiculous. And she's like, yeah, and you didn't when you were playing 10 minutes ago. I was like, oh yeah, I guess I probably looked even worse. That's totally true, right?
Yeah, he's just doing jack-off motions all day. I do think the more that we get used to some of these gyro controls, and the more, Valve made Half-Life Alyx, these blockbuster games, VR games, where people are just being in VR more and they're playing more, and it's kind of making it less stigmatized and just enjoying it more. And if it's less stigmatized, then a player can enjoy it more, and then other people can watch them play and enjoy it more too.
Yeah, and it's like, if you've always kind of just assumed, if you like haven't touched motion controls since the Wii, I implore you to give it a try on the Switch. Like if like you use motion controls on the Wii and you're like, that really sucked, and I like just hate motion controls. Like try it out in Splatoon, try it out in like Doom 2016, try it out in Fortnite. Like I find it's been so refined past that point. That it's definitely worth trying out. And then if it's not for you and you don't want to use it, don't. And if you like motion controls, don't shit on people for not using them. You know what I mean? It's all preference, right? Like people have their own preference, and that's totally fine. And so it's like I said, it's having the option there is great. But I think that like the more that it's accepted, I think the more that people will realize like, hey, it does give me that little bit of accuracy that mouse and keyboard gave me. You know what I mean? Or it does give me the edge that I didn't have before. And not even having the option sometimes I think can hurt games in the long run, because you can't be as precise as you want to be. So I'm just looking forward to seeing where it goes next, because I don't think this is the end of it. I
spent a lot of this episode ragging on motion controls, but I will say I would love to see a new Super Monkey Ball game or a Marble Madness game that employs motion controls. Because I think that would like bring...
I don't know, man. Banana Blitz sucked.
I mean, there was a new game that just got announced that I saw. It's like
Scully, yeah.
Scully, where you play as a skull and you roll around, and it feels like Marble Madness-esque.
What platform is
and
that
also
for Switch?
It's for all of them.
Sweet.
Yeah, for Switch.
To a point that somebody made is also like motion controls are kind of experimental, and I want video games to experiment and try new things and try new ways to interact and stuff like that. And I think when we just shit on things and want our normal controller, that sucks, because that doesn't push the the genre or the medium forward. So all right, we've talked for a long time about this. We should probably move on. All right.
Sounds good to me.
We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the video games that we've been playing recently. Other than playing a little bit of Smash Ultimate with the community on Sunday night, I've really only played 2 games this past week, which is Hollow Knight which I have become obsessed with again. And I complained about the difficulty a few weeks ago in the bench system, but I'm in the groove right now. And so I'm like beating bosses. I'm on the final boss, though I've decided to go just explore and get some of the upgrades that I don't have yet and stuff like that. So probably beating that before next week. Love that game. So great. And then just tons of Mario Maker, which I've talked a lot about. I just really back into that and making levels again and really having a good time playing Mario Maker.
I want to play your levels, Patrick.
Yeah, I need to upload a bunch of them. I'm kind of working on like a world. And so I've got a lot of levels that I need to just upload and kind of like see how people feel about them and maybe tweak them and that kind of stuff. I don't know. I take too much time and I don't upload everything, but I enjoy it. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
That's what I've been playing.
I'll go next. Yeah, I've been playing Kunai. I'm just kidding. I feel like we have to mention Kunai every episode. So here it is. Kunai plug. It's our favorite game. I played through Ghost of Tsushima and that was so good. Yeah, I beat it. Loved it. Great swan song for feels like the end of the PS4 era. Loved it. Would recommend. Also picked back up since I beat that game. Paper Mario. I'm just like so bewildered and impressed by the writing in Paper Mario. The dialogue is just like incredible, just like the localization project to make that fit within the context of, North American humor. Yeah. I don't know how they did it, but they fucking did a great job, and I fucking love it so far.
Glad to hear you say that.
Cool.
I agree.
Cool way to talk, man.
yeah. I'm gonna talk from ineligible.
I think they did a good job with us whole far.
How about y'all?
I've been playing a few games. Yeah, also been still making my way through Paper Mario, Origami King. I can't play it for like super long periods at once, so I've been playing a little bit at a time and been enjoying it. I got to a very emotional part in the game. That's all I'll say.
Yep.
I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about if you've been there. But I was not prepared for that. And we'll talk more about that in our spoiler discussion of the game.
We gotta have one.
Whenever we do that. I did play the Paper Mario. Speaking of Paper Mario, I did play the Tetris 99 Maximus Cup with Paper Mario, and I got that theme. So what else is new? Other than that, the main thing I've been sinking most of my time into this past week, and I actually got this as a birthday present from my dad. So thanks, Dad, for listening to the podcast and for this present. Was I got one of these Chinese like handheld emulator devices. This specifically is the Anbernic RG350M. I'll post some more about this in our socials, but this thing is fucking awesome. It runs really, really well. I'm showing you guys it right now. But it's got two sticks. It's got, two shoulder buttons, face buttons and everything. And it plays NES, SNES, Game Boy Advance, all the way basically up into the PlayStation. And it plays all of these games like flawlessly. And that includes emulators and Sonic, and Sega and all that kind of stuff. And I'm loving this thing.
It looks like it's about the size of a smartphone. Is that about right?
I would say about so. It feels like it's a little bit slightly bigger than a Game Boy Advance, or maybe around the same size as a Game Boy Advance. But it just feels really good in the hand. It's all made out of metal and aluminum, and it just runs really, really well. It unfortunately doesn't play N64 games or Dreamcast games. There are some retro handhelds that do now, but they don't have the same kind of build quality as the RG350M. And I just love it, man. I've been loading this thing up with, lots of like ROM hacks and stuff like that. Some notable ones I've been playing. I played Rhythm Tengoku, which is the original Rhythm Heaven game, which was never released here in the US, but I've been playing an English patch of that. Been poking around a Mother 3 English translation as well, which has been a lot of fun. One of my favorite ones I've been playing for Game Boy Advance is the Super Mario Advanced 4, which was the remake of Super Mario Brothers 3. There was like a fan patch for that, which adds back in all the e-reader levels. because they had all these bonus levels that you would buy in packs of e-reader cards back in the day, for anyone that used that peripheral. And this patch like has all those levels already built into it. You don't have to scan cards. I don't think that this device could scan cards, but it's been great. It's like Mario Maker pre-Mario Maker. It's all these like elements thrown together from Super Mario World and Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario Bros. 2. And so that's been a ton of fun. I really recommend it. I mean, if you don't get this, there are other options. I think in the Switch Headz Facebook group, Rhea actually just posted, there's another model that's coming out pretty soon, not by the same company, but there are tons of them out there, and I really recommend it. It's a ton of fun to play old games on, and it basically makes me not really care about the analog pocket, because it's like, if I'm going to be playing games like Game Boy games, I might as well just emulate them on this thing. And so I'm really enjoying it. I'd recommend it for anybody that's looking for some nice retro handheld stuff.
What's the battery life on that?
Oh, it's good. I'd say I have to charge it probably after I'd say 6 to 10 hours of play. It kind of depends on what you're playing, right? Like PlayStation 1 will really eat up the battery like pretty quickly. But even then you'll get at least 2 hours out of it, probably a little bit more. And then when you're playing like classic Game Boy games, like this thing can last forever. The screen is great. The viewing angles are all great. I could talk about this thing forever, so I'm going to pass it back over to you. But if anybody has any questions about that, feel free to hit me up on Instagram or Twitter or something like that.
Cina, what have you been playing?
Not a whole lot since I kind of slowed down on Animal Crossing. I guess I started playing Donkey Kong Country, the original one, on Nintendo Switch Online. Been having a little bit of fun with that, but that's been about it. I want to pick up Paper Mario. I've been hearing good things about it. So,
dude, Cina, we should play some Donkey Kong Country online together.
Let's do it. I want to.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
Nice. Well, then I think that does it for the show. Thanks so much, Cina, for coming on and talking to us about motion controls. That was an awesome discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks to Corduroy for doing our music. Sorry, Chris McKeever, we have still not played Disney Tsum Tsum Festival. If you're looking for me, Patrick, online, you can find me most places as PDYX.
I'm Matthew on Twitter, MATHYOU.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Cina? Where can people find you online?
You can find me most places as 1000 Hertz. That's 1000HZ.
Very good. If you'd like to find our social media for the show online, we are at Switch Headz on Twitter. We are at Super Switch Headz on Instagram and Facebook. Make sure you join our Discord group. It's always popping off, and our Facebook group on Facebook. That's erroneous. Join our Facebook group. It's always a fun time, and we've got a quite a nice community on there as well. And you can pitch us show ideas and leave comments, and we'll shout you out on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to today's episode on motion controls. That was a very spirited discussion. I really enjoyed that quite a bit. And thanks again, Cina, for coming on the show. Make sure you tune in next week. We've got a very special guest for you next week. I'm not going to spoil it just yet, but make sure you tune in. We've got a lot of discussion to talk about next week, so I'm very excited about that. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, we love you so much. We'll see you next week. Keep fighting the good fight out there. There's still a lot of work to do. Keep washing your hands. Keep wearing a mask. Do all that shit. We love you. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.